So how in the world do we know what happened thousands and thousands of years ago? I mean, think about it. There were no witnesses around today, no photographs, nothing. Well, today, we're going to be detectives. We're putting on our hats, grabbing our magnifying glasses, and investigating the clues left behind to piece together the incredible story of the ancient world.
You know, this is the exact question a student named Rashida asked in our source material. And honestly, it's the perfect place to start. It's a real puzzle, isn't it? No cameras, no newspapers. So where do you even begin to look for answers?
And the answer is, you look for clues. It's that simple. Historians are basically detectives. They work a cold case that's thousands of years old, piecing together the story from any little bit of evidence that has survived. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Follow that trail of clues together.
Now, in the detective world, these clues are called sources, and they basically come in two flavors. You've got physical objects that we literally dig up from the ground, that's archaeology, and you have written stuff, like ancient manuscripts. To kick off our investigation, we have to go way back, even before writing existed, to the oldest clues of all, the ones buried deep in the earth.
All right, so our first stop is digging in the dirt. We're looking at clues buried deep underground. This is where archaeology shines, because even a simple stone, a little fragment of bone, can tell us an absolutely fascinating story about our earliest ancestors.
So for literally millions of years, people lived as hunter-gatherers. But how do we know that? Well, everything you see here comes from those physical clues. We found simple stone tools and animal bones near rivers like the Narmada. And these little fragments, they tell a huge story of a life lived constantly on the move, always searching for the next meal.
And then, boom! Around 12,000 years ago, something massive happens. The climate gets warmer, grasslands start to pop up, and people begin experimenting. They figure out how to grow their own food and how to tame animals. This was a complete game changer. It meant going from a life of constant wandering to actually settling down in one place. And that changed absolutely everything. And if you want proof, look no further than a site called Mehrgarde. This place is like a historical jackpot. Archaeologists found charred grains. That's proof they were farming. They found sheep and goat bones, proof they were herding. They even dug up the remains of square houses, proof they lived in villages. They even found people buried with goats, which suggests they believed in some kind of life after death. You see, every clue adds another layer to the picture.
So, this huge shift to farming, it set the stage for something even bigger, the birth of cities. But what's so incredible is that the story of India's very first urban civilization was completely lost for thousands of years, and it was only rediscovered by total accident.
Okay, picture this. Around 4,700 years ago, these amazing cities rise up in the Indus Valley, and then they just vanish. For centuries, nobody had a clue they even existed. Then, fast forward to the 1850s, some railway engineers find huge piles of these really high-quality bricks. They think, great, and use them to build a railway, not realizing they're dismantling an ancient city. It took until about 80 years ago for archaeologists to finally put it all together and realize they'd found an entire lost civilization.
And wow, what a civilization it was! The ruins show us an incredibly organized society. I mean, we're talking meticulously planned cities with streets laid out in a grid. They had advanced covered drains, better than some places have today. They had huge public structures like the Great Bath. This wasn't just a bunch of people living together. This was a complex, thriving, and brilliantly engineered world.
And then, around 3,900 years ago, it all just stopped. People abandoned the cities. The writing was forgotten. Why? That, my friends, is one of the biggest mysteries our historical detectives are still trying to solve. The clues point in a few directions, but we still don't have that final answer.
So, as we move forward in time on our investigation, the clues start to change. We're not just looking at physical objects anymore. We now begin to find traces of what people said, what they sang, what they believed, things passed down through generations.
And our first major clue of this new type is the Rigveda. It was composed around 3,500 years ago. But here's the thing, it wasn't a book like we think of one. It was a massive collection of sacred hymns all meticulously memorized and passed down word for word from teacher to student for hundreds of years before anyone ever wrote it down.
And the Rigveda gives us a peek into a totally different world from those Harappan cities. It describes a society of tribes called Jana, led by chiefs called Raja. But get this, these weren't kings with giant palaces and huge armies. Their wealth was literally measured in how many cows they had, and they fought battles for more cattle and better pastures.
Now, at around the same time, in other parts of India, people were leaving behind a completely different kind of clue: megaliths. These are giant stone boulders used to mark where people were buried. And this is so important because it shows us that historians can't just look at one piece of evidence. They have to piece together clues from all over the place to get the full story.
The really juicy clues, though, are what's found inside these burials. Some graves, they just have a few simple pots. But others, like one found at a place called Brahmagiri, are just filled with treasure. Gold beads, copper bangles, you name it. That difference is a massive clue. It screams that this was a society that had clear divisions between the rich and the poor, the powerful and the common folk.
Okay, let's fast forward to about 2,500 years ago, because this is where the pace of change just goes into overdrive. Those small tribal settlements we were just talking about, they start to transform into something much, much bigger and more powerful: kingdoms. And right alongside these huge political changes, you get a flood of new questions and brand new ideas.
And you can actually see the evolution pretty clearly. It's like a three-step process. First, you had the Jana, that's the tribe. Then, as they settled down, they formed a territory, which was known as a Janapada. And over time, the strongest of these conquered their neighbors and ballooned into these huge states called Mahajanapadas, literally the great kingdoms.
And these new kingdoms were a whole different ballgame compared to the old tribal chiefs. We're talking about fortified capital cities with massive walls. They had professional, standing armies that got paid regular salaries. And this is the crucial part: they funded it all with a system of regular taxes. Power wasn't just about having a lot of cows anymore. It was about armies, territory, and cold, hard cash, or, grain.
So, you have this period of really intense change. Cities are growing, there's more wealth, more warfare, and all of this upheaval also made people stop and think. Thinkers all across the land started asking these really deep questions about what it all meant. What's the nature of life? Why is there suffering? What are we all doing here?
And one of the most powerful answers to those questions came from Siddhartha Gautama, who we know as the Buddha. His core insight was actually pretty simple, but it was profound. He said, look, life is full of suffering. And the reason for that suffering is our constant craving for things we don't have. He taught that by practicing moderation, by getting those desires under control, we could find a path to real peace.
But the Buddha wasn't the only one searching for answers. You had Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, who taught a radical path of ahimsa, or absolute nonviolence toward every single living thing. And at the same time, you had other thinkers who gathered to debate the deepest questions of all in writings called the Upanishads. They were asking, what is the self, the Atman? And what is the ultimate reality of the universe, the Brahman? Big, big questions.
So we've followed the clues all the way from simple stone tools and forgotten cities to ancient hymns and groundbreaking new philosophies. Each piece of evidence, every single source, it adds another layer, another color to the story, helping us reconstruct these incredible worlds that came before ours.
And that brings us to one last really important question. Think about it. Our investigation has shown us hunter-gatherers, sophisticated city dwellers, wandering nomads, and powerful kings, all living in different parts of the subcontinent, sometimes at the very same time. So are we really looking at one single simple story of the past? Or is it actually many, many different pasts all weaving together to create the complex, amazing story of who we are today?